Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy, your academic counselor, and I welcome you to my session. Today we will discuss the play titled Arms and the Man, written by the Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw. So in our previous session we discussed in detail the summary and character analysis of the main characters in this particular play. Today we'll move on to the analysis part. In the sense, we'll look at the critical aspects that are to be discussed. Arms and the Man by George Bernard Shaw. So we already had an introduction in the previous sessions. So we'll start off with the relevance of the title. Very often with respect to your TEE, I have seen this particular question. Often this question comes as if a short question for your TEE. So if you are preparing for your examinations, it's better for you to mark and study this particular part, that is the title of the play. So as some of you must have already understood, this particular line, the title Arms and the Man, is taken from another work. You must have heard of Virgil. His work Aeneid is also very well renowned and it's very famous. It's considered as one of the classics in literature. So this work, Virgil's Aeneid, had been translated into English by Dryden. Dryden is also very famous. You must have heard of Dryden. He is an essayist, a writer who belonged to British literary canon. So this particular title of the play, Arms and the Man, is taken from Dryden's translation of the opening lines of Virgil's Aeneid. So Arms and the Man is actually part of the opening lines of Virgil's Aeneid. So Dryden translated it, and it is from this translation that this title of the play is taken. So if you look at page number 151 of your official study material, it's the material that I'm referring to for the session. So there you can see it's given, I quote from Dryden's translation, Arms and the man I sing, who forced by fate and haughty Juno's unrelenting hate, I unquote. So there you can see the same line as part of Dryden's translation. So remember that this is very significant with respect to your study regarding Arms and the Man. So Aeneid, as I mentioned, is a Latin epic of war, military exploits and adventure. While we discussed the summary, we studied that in this particular work, Arms and the Man, war and love become significant themes. So in this particular work, Aeneid, war is glorified and man is shown to be a creature who can attain heroic proportions. But when we go to Arms and the Man, it is not the same. There is a twist given to these lines. Shaw, we can say, has given an ironic twist to Virgil's lines. Here in Arms and the Man, Shaw glorifies neither war nor the life of the soldier. War is not glorified. The life of the soldier is not glorified. How can we know that? We saw that in the characterization of Bluntschli. So Shaw's view in this play is that it is meaningless for men to fight wars to gain glory and honor. There is no point in fighting for glory and honor. So as I mentioned, through the character Bluntschli, Shaw makes it clear that for most soldiers, war and weapons are not the instruments of achieving glory. But what are they? They are means of earning their livelihood. It is how they survive. So we saw that Bluntschli is a professional soldier willing to fight in any country for payment. We had a detailed discussion of his character also. Remember to study the character analysis of Bluntschli for your TEE. To mention a few relevant points, Bluntschli's professional background, military background and expertise makes him question the unprofessional way in which the Bulgarians led by Sergius attacked the Serbs. Remember I told you this is all about the Bulgarian-Serb war, and it is how the play starts off. Thus, we get a very realistic perspective of war that does not glorify it or see it as the opportunity to gain honor and fame. So, who is a soldier in Shaw's view? We look at that. A soldier in Bernard Shaw's view should ideally try to save his life rather than die during a war. The concept of glorious death is not at all supported by Shaw. So as we discussed, the plot of this drama revolves around war, and it deals with men and their arms, though in a sense different from that of Virgil's lines. Hence, the title Arms and the Man is quite appropriate for the play. So from the TE perspective, when they ask you how appropriate is the title of the play, you need to start your answer firstly giving an introduction. Thereafter you should mention this particular title is taken from Dryden's translation of Virgil's Aeneid, especially the opening lines, and then you need to explain a few lines regarding Aeneid and how Shaw has given a twist, ironic twist to Virgil's lines, and then you can mention bluntly and how the war is not glorified. Glorious death on the battlefield is not at all glorified in this particular work, and hence you can conclude that this plot revolves around war and it deals with men and their arms in a different sense from what Virgil has expressed through his lines, and hence the title Arms and the Man we can say is appropriate for the play. Alright? Yes. Relate and study so that you can make use of all the important points that are to be mentioned when such a question is seen in your question paper. Similar is the case with Arms and the Man as an anti-romantic comedy. So here there is a higher probability of the question setters asking you an essay based on this topic. Analyze Arms and the Man as an anti-romantic comedy. So if they ask you such a question, do not just restrict your answer based on this few paragraphs given in your study material. Obviously, you need to mention everything written there. Apart from that, you need to add an introduction and a conclusion which is quite appropriate and relevant to the context. In my previous session, I already told you how to structure your answer, what all to write from Shaw as if an introduction, and hence I suppose you have a better idea. Okay, so here let's focus on what is written as part of this section in your study material. Arms and the Man is the first in the series of pleasant plays. Remember, yesterday in our previous session we discussed the collection written by George Bernard Shaw. Pleasant plays, yes, it's part of that. Another important aspect is that Arms and the Man has got a subtitle. The subtitle is an anti-romantic comedy in 3 acts. In our last session we discussed that there is 3 acts in this play, remember? Yes. Moreover, we know it's an anti-romantic comedy. So that is how you write the full title, Arms and the Man, colon, an anti-romantic comedy in 3 acts. So from your TE perspective, I want you to write the full title. You should keep that in mind. That would fetch you good marks if you write the full title. Okay. So now comes the question, what do you mean by an anti-romantic comedy? Any idea? You must have read many rom-coms, romantic comedies, even movies you must have seen, right? But in an anti-romantic comedy, a text can be considered as of an anti-romantic comedy if such a text overturns the tropes commonly found in a romantic comedy, such as heroism, sacrifice, etc., which lead to a happy conclusion for the lovers. Anything that is not so conventional to the plot of a romantic comedy can certainly be considered as if a anti-romantic comedy. We will have a detailed analysis. As the character of Reina, we analyze that her idea of love comes from the reading of Byron and Pushkin. she used to read a lot of works written by Byron and Pushkin. If you have no idea, these two are also renowned writers. So she used to have this idealized notion of love, and she used to glorify war heroes, right? Yes. But the entrance of Bluntschli in a way destroyed her romantic dreams. It is because Bluntschli is free from romantic illusions about war, and she, Reina, realizes the folly of her romantic illusions. It is the second act of this play that focuses on the exposure of romantic notions of love and marriage. While we discussed the summary, we mentioned this, that is the second act begins with a scene of higher love between Reina and Sergius. We know that Reina adores Sergius for his heroic action in the war, and it is for this matter that she calls him my hero, my king, while Sergius calls her my queen. See the unrealistic expressions that they make? Yes, they agree that they have found the higher love, but immediately Sergius confesses to Luca that the higher love is very fatiguing to keep up for long, and higher love is thus revealed to be a sham, and those who claim to experience higher love simply fool themselves. So in that way, we can say that in this particular play, Arms and the Man show proves that romantic ideas of love and war are nothing but delusions, and therefore Arms and the Man can be considered as if an anti-romantic comedy. So as I mentioned, if this comes with TEE, you need to put in your own inputs also. Write a proper introduction. You can start off with GB show and come back to Arms and the Man. Write an intro on Arms and the Man. I discussed in my previous session about this, and then come to the exact topic. What is an anti-romantic comedy? You can mention, and you can mention this is part of Pleasant Plays, and then you can mention how things turn out in the play. Like you can mention how Reina used to value this over glorified notions of love and war, how Sergius used to have high love in his attitude and his commitments, and then you can say with the entry of Bluntschli, everything seemed to have taken a huge turn. And you can also mention that Bluntschli is in a way a foil to Sergius. What do you mean by the term foil? F-O-I-L. So foil is a person whose qualities contrast with the qualities of another person. The qualities of Sergius are totally different from the qualities of Bluntschli. In that way, you can also mention that, and remember to mention every important point that is mentioned as part of this section from your study material. Rely on your study material, that would fetch you marks for your examination. More than for the examination purpose, it is very important for us to have a detailed understanding of this particular drama. It is because it is of such relevance even today, and it is for that matter that we are studying this even in 2022. So that's all from that section. Now let's have a quick overview regarding the reception of Arms and the Man. Yes. Moving on to a brief explanation regarding the reception of Arms and the Man. Remember, this is a play. Very often plays are performed, right? So Arms and the Man, this play was written by Shaw between 26 November 1893 and 30th March 1894. So remember, this was first performed on 21st April 1894. If you are so bad in remembering the dates, at least remember the year. You should remember that this was first performed in the year 1894. I think I should clarify the grammatical aspect here. When you are writing the date, you write on 21st April. But if you are writing the year, you don't use on, you use the preposition in. In 1894, on 21st April. I hope you understood the difference. Didn't you? Good. So keep that in mind. This is a common mistake that we see in most of the students' writings. So now let's have a quick look at what the critics and the famous writers of those era had to say about this particular work. We already saw W.B. Yeats, right? So according to the famous poet W.B. Yeats, the first performance of Arms and the Man was quite sensational. So he was very much impressed with the performance of this play. Shaw was acknowledged as one of the most powerful voices in the literary world of his time. Whose time? Shaw's time. And about the critics' opinion, many critics wrote against the play after its first performance. That means there were negative criticism. Some of the critics felt that it was mocking soldiers and the military. The main reason for this negative response was that some of the critics were of the opinion that this particular play was ridiculing or mocking soldiers and the military. So during that time, there was this magazine titled New Review in prominence. So in the July 1894 issue of the New Review, Shaw wrote a long article titled A Dramatic Realist to his critics. And it is in this article that he countered the criticisms raised by theatre enthusiasts and critics against the play Arms and the Man. So what did Shaw do? Shaw wrote a response to these criticisms. Another reason for the negative response could be that many members of the audience, see, this is a drama which is performed, so there will definitely be audience watching the drama, right? So many members of the audience failed to understand that characters like Bluntschli were meant to force them to rethink what exactly their false ideals of love and war. So this drama had a lot to offer. It was more or less offering the learners, the audience, to rethink their ideals of love and war. Instead, they ridiculed such characters, the audience ridiculed such characters for falling short of their romantic expectations and idealization. So therefore we can say that the play failed in its critique of the romanticizing of love and war. As a consequence, many people in the audience mistakenly saw the play as a farce. What do you mean by a farce? Farce refers to a funny play based on ridiculous and unlikely situations. So this is not actually a farce, but the audience misunderstood this particular play to be a farce. The audience failed to see that through a down-to-earth character like Bluntschli, Shaw was presenting an anti-romantic view of war. We now understand because we read and reread this and we have all this critical analysis in place. But those days, right after the performance, the audience of that era were not able to comprehend this. So Shaw was concerned that a large section of the audience failed to understand the message of the play. Then David Setran points out that Shaw's aim was to transform the theatre. As a playwright and director, his aim was to transform the theatre. So from all these explanations, we understand that Shaw was extremely critical of 19th century British drama, especially of the well-made play and the farce. These two were the most popular forms of dramatic entertainment of those era. So what did Shaw do? He focused in the rest of his writing career on the task of educating the London theatre audience and also in creating in them the capacity to fully exploit the political potential of theatre. In short, he wanted to transform the theatre of his times. That's all that you need to remember. Now comes another important section, Bernard Shaw's views on war. By now we understand that he held strong views on war and military leadership, which he consistently expressed throughout his letters, speeches, pamphlets and also plays. Remember that. There was a theatre critic named Christopher Innes. He wrote that in the early years of 20th century, Shaw wrote a number of essays for periodicals as well as public letters to newspapers, and he also delivered many lectures attacking military. In these years before the First World War, he published several essays on disarmament, arguing for an international agreement to outlaw war. He was not in support of war. So his pacifist views made him extremely unpopular and nearly got him arrested during the years of World War I. He was not into glorifying the war. So now comes the importance of the theme of war in Arms and the Man. So Arms and the Man was probably the earliest play in which Shaw expressed his anti-war position. Remember, it's an anti-romantic comedy. It expresses Shaw's anti-war position. Later, he mentioned this in some other plays too. These plays include The Man of Destiny, written in the year 1895, The Devil's Disciple, written in the year 1896, Major Barbara, written in the year 1907, Saint John, written in 1924, etc., among many others. So we can say that Shaw's deep interest in military matters appears in a number of his writings, especially in his plays. Instances of bravery, cowardice, military genius, romantic glory, and death on the battlefield. Even in this particular play, all these aspects are addressed. We see bravery, cowardice, military genius, romantic glory, death on the battlefield. All these aspects are addressed. If you don't have a clear-cut idea, you may refer to our previous session on summary. Let me remind you, whenever they ask you a question, if it's on the theme of war, it is not just what is written in the section. You need to relate and write whatever relevant matter you can find in your study material. So that is where revision comes into point. If you read the text only for once, you won't be able to relate and write. Alright, so you need to study and try to revise before your exam too. It's possible because you just have 4 sections. It's possible for this particular paper, it's possible, don't you worry. We discussed the title of the play. Now comes another important section, that is another important aspect, that is de-romanticizing war in Arms and the Man. It's pretty much the same thing that is explained. According to Christopher Innes, Arms and the Man is an inversion or parody of the military melodrama, which was very popular in the 19th century. So, military melodrama was very popular. What do you mean by melodrama? It is a play in which the characters and events are so exaggerated that they do not seem real. But this Arms and the Man is totally opposite to that. Alright, it is an inversion or a parody of this military melodrama. Shaw has created this sort of a satire of romanticized views of war in this particular play by contrasting the characters of Sergius and Bluntschli. We already studied that these two are foils, right? Yes, they are opposite in characters. Sergius is very theatrical in his displays of military valor, while Bluntschli is quite cautious and down to earth. We can see that Bluntschli is more practical in nature too. So this particular play forces the thinking members of the audience to revise their views about the ideal soldier. How should an ideal soldier be? That becomes a point of discussion. In contrast to Sergius, who successfully led a charge against the Bulgarians, Bluntschli, the Swiss captain, tries to hide in a lady's bedroom. See the difference. See, one is over glorified and other is quite practically shown. So it is only later in the play that we learn that the Bulgarian charge led by Sergius had won their victory just because of luck. Okay, it is because the Serbs led by Bluntschli had accidentally been sent the wrong sized cartridges. So this is what exactly happened. So you can have a detailed reading of de-romanticizing war in Arms and the Man on page numbers 158 to 161 of your textbook. Make sure that you read through this. Okay, there is a higher probability of this being one of the essay questions. It's the same thing that we discussed that is being explained. There are some quotations from Arms and the Man. Just have a look at it, so that if in case they ask this as part of annotation, which is very unlikely, if at all they ask, you can understand and write about it. So read about that. In short, you need to understand that Shaw does not ridicule the profession of the soldier. He satirizes the romantic views of war that were prevalent among some sections of the audience of those times. Okay, especially through the military melodramas, we discussed that. So Shaw in a way projects a realistic view of the dangers and trauma of the life of the soldier on the actual battlefield. That is one aspect that you need to remember. Through this play, he is actually portraying the true dangers and trauma of the life of a soldier on the battlefield. So we discussed the theme of war, and now comes another important theme, that is the theme of love. Here comes Reina, Sergius, Bluntschli, Luca, everybody. We'll have to analyze everybody with respect to our explanation of the theme of love. So Arms and the Man questions highly idealized expression of love, just as it questions romanticized views of war. So according to David Sutran, in this play, Shaw sets out to challenge conventional beliefs of love and war, foremost among them. So the conventionality of these aspects are questioned. Then he says that Reina speaks to Sergius of the higher love. She conforms to Shaw's definition of the womanly woman in his prose work, The Quintessence of Ibsenism. We discussed this once we discussed the life and works of Bernard Shaw. I hope you remember. So this is one notable aspect. You may read this as part of your study material. They have given you instances from the textbook also. I'm very sure that you wouldn't be reading the whole drama. So at least make sure that you read these examples and the instances provided in your study material. Okay, we discussed all these as part of our character analysis. So it's pretty much the same thing. I don't want to repeat and re-repeat. If you are not very sure, please refer to those explanations. Now comes class distinctions in the play. Dear learners, this is very important. If you are lucky, you'll be happy to see this question in your question paper. I really wish this comes, because this is very easy. I'm very sure you'll be able to answer this. I'll give you a detailed explanation as well. Most of the characters in this play actually aspire to move to a superior social class, and thus class distinction and mobility between social classes become a major concerns of the play. Remember, when we discussed the summary, I mentioned how Luca wanted an upper position in the society, and for that matter she flirted with Sergius and ended up in a relationship. Remember? Yes. So throughout the play, the entire Petkov family, what do you mean by the Petkov family? Reina's family, yes. This family is seen to be very conscious of the need to appear gentle and cultivated. See, both Reina and her mother take utmost care to be well dressed according to the latest fashions. There are many instances in the text. If you have time, you may refer to that. Anyway, I'll mention the most important ones. Reina boastfully tells Bluntschli that the Petkovs are civilized people and not ignorant country folks. So this happens during their initial conversation in the bedroom. Remember how Bluntschli climbs into Reina's bedroom at night? Yes, it's exactly during that time that this conversation happens. Like her parents, Reina is also aware of the superior social standing of her family. Remember, I told you she belongs to a very high class society, and she is quite aware of that, and she is so proud of that. She boasts to Bluntschli that her house is equipped with all amenities like an inside staircase. Everything is there. Alright. So when Bluntschli asks Petkov to accept him as Reina's suitor, Catherine politely turns him down. The reason is that she is of the opinion that her family is very rich and finest families in Bulgaria, and at the same time Bluntschli is a common soldier. There also you need to note that it is only after knowing that Bluntschli is rich, he has acquired some fortune from his father, that they agreed to Bluntschli and Reina's engagement. That is something notable. When they learn how wealthy he is, they are willing to overlook the differences in social status. Yes, that is very important. And now you need to mention Luca. The servant girl Luca has ambitions to move above her station. That is, she is naturally rebellious and does not show the civility expected of her class. She is very bold and she despises Nicola. Nicola is actually her betrothed. That is, Nicola and her engagement was done actually. And she is the one who taunts Sergius that he dare not marry her, as she is a servant and he is afraid of what society would think of such a marriage. Luca is naturally rebellious, as I mentioned. She has been questioning the rigidities of the class system, and her proposed marriage to Sergius gives her the opportunity to move to a higher station. So we can say that in a way she was successful in climbing the social ladder. So remember, Shaw was a socialist. We discussed that when we discussed the life and works of Shaw, remember? Yes. So Shaw was preoccupied with class and caste divisions. No, class and class divisions, and in this play he depicts the complications arising due to strict class divisions in the 19th century Europe. Remember, this takes place during the 19th century Europe, and at that time there were strict class divisions and there were problems associated with these class divisions. So in this play he has mentioned the 19th century Europe's class divisions and the problems encountered while trying to overcome these class divisions. So whenever you get a question on class distinctions in this play Arms and the Man, you need to mention the general setup of the Petko's family, how Reina boasts about her elite status, how Catherine is proud of the class. Catherine is actually Reina's mother. Okay, then you need to mention how they agreed despite the class distinctions between Bluntschli and the Petkov, and then you need to mention Luca and her character there also. So with that, you will have a detailed overview on class distinctions in the play, and that pretty much concludes the critical aspects relating to Arms and the Man. We started off with the title and its relevance. Thereafter we looked at Arms and the Man as an anti-romantic comedy. We also focused our attention towards the reception of Arms and the Man. Initially it was not great. It's because the audience failed to understand the true message of the play. Bernard Shaw's views on war and love are very much important. You need to focus your attention on de-romanticizing war in Arms and the Man as of one of the most probable questions for TEE. So is the class distinctions in the play. So that's all for this session. I hope I made it clear to you. Thank you so much.